Once upon a time, the last survivor of humanity fought to the very end against the demons, but ended up defeated. Nonetheless, the gods gave him a second chance and sent him back 10 years in the past. Don't think they did this out of kindness, they took everything away from humans and used them for fun, but our hero, Zephyr, swore that he will crush them all someday. The world has ended. All the surviving population has been captured and used to feed the new monsters. As the last survivor, Zephyr fought this battle alone until he was ultimately defeated by none other than the demon lord Tartarus, the one who dominates all other demons. Zephyr was bleeding out, but Tartarus healed him a little so they could talk for a short time. He regarded our protagonist as the great human who rose to the peak of humanity and was capable of bothering him for so long. Everyone always wants to surrender before a powerful enemy, which makes them weak and pathetic, says Tartarus. Zephyr is clearly different than the others, so Tartarus offered him to be by his side to conquer the home of the gods while extending his hand to him. But Zephyr knows the real reason why Tartarus is offering him such position. He knows Zephyr won't survive, he just wants to see him pathetically beg for his life to the enemy that took away all his friends and loved ones. Zephyr starts reaching for Tartarus' hands while remembering a female figure that told him not to swear so much, but since he didn't listen to her, she cast a spell on him. He grabbed Tartarus' hand tightly and said that if he did a certain thing with his hand, a massive burst of power from another dimension will blow him up. Zephyr is ready to give Tartarus the answer to his offer, and looking at him directly in the eyes gives him the middle finger. Immediately, a huge explosion burst out of Zephyr, and we see him completely shattered while Tartarus' hands disappeared. In a burst of rage, he slams the remainings of Zephyr to the ground, and with that, our hero's long battle came to an end. Or maybe not, because the next thing he knew, he was laying on the floor, completely healed and with his armor shining. He didn't know where he was, he just saw statues of gods, but it didn't look like any temple he knows. He gets the idea that this is the afterlife, so he must be in the underworld, but a voice is heard from above. It explains that he is in the bottommost level of the pantheon of gods. The one talking was an angel descending and saying that she is a messenger from God, Mercedes, an elite angel. She tells him that normally he would be sent to the underworld, but since several gods insisted, the 3 supreme gods decided to send Zephyr back in time. Zephyr is shocked, so Mercedes explains to him that he will be sent to the past with all his memories intact as a chance to change his fate. He asks what do the gods expect of him, he knows nothing in this world is for free. Zephyr knows there is something fishy, the gods turned a blind eye when the demons started invading and the humans prayed for their salvation. Instead of receiving any help, the gods refused to accept any offering and also took away the powers of the priests. This was the main reason why humanity couldn't fight back the demons. To answer his question, Mercedes let the gods talk through her. They said, "We want to see something a little more interesting." Mercedes starts explaining how his 5-year-long battle against the demons impressed the gods, how his struggle entertained them, but she couldn't say anything else as Zephyr threw a punch right next to Mercedes' face, exploding a column behind her. He starts screaming, he was furious that all of humanity's struggle was just a bit of entertainment to watch. When he was about to punch Mercedes, she summons a big foot that crushed him. She asks him to be respectful in front of the gods and explains to him that there was a misunderstanding. The gods only had interest in Zephyr, not the ordinary human race. Mercedes tells him that if he wants something from the gods, it'd be better if him and his entire race proved that they are worth. She was sending him to the past, as she says that there was a certain someone who also wanted him to come back. It was none other than Tartarus. He was not a demon, he was the god of destruction, and he already had destroyed 10 worlds without even being injured, so he wanted Zephyr to go back in time to restore his perfect score. Zephyr accepts the offer, and as he is being transported to the past, he swears revenge on both Tartarus and the gods. Next thing we see is the protagonist waking up, with some guys splashing water on him. After seeing them, he remembers where he is, 10 years in the past, when he used to be a slave of the temple. Apparently, he was beaten up for defending some kid. He remembers that Mercedes told him that in order to unlock his abilities, he just have to say unlock perks, which he does and realizes that they gave him something else. In the next chapter, we see Zephyr working really hard while thinking about all the high levels perks the gods gave him. He can't believe it. Suddenly, the head of the minor team starts yelling at him for dozing off, and swings at him with a whip, which Zephyr grabs in midair with his bare hands, but instead of fighting back he just apologizes and goes back to work. He wasn't damaged by the whip, nor he feels any fatigue, and that is thanks to the ability Iron Wall, which allows him to increase his durability and to cancel all damage or fatigue lower than his durability. With this and other 9 perks, he will be his old self, or future self, in no time. At the end of the day, all teams are gathered up to rank them for their work. Sapphire was teamed up with the kid from earlier and they both got first place, which shocked the other teams. As it is custom on the mine, the last team won't get their supplies, they will be given to the 3 first teams. Then they start to pray to the goddess of light, one of the 3 supreme gods. Her religion is the largest across the land and the largest money lender. Everyone there in the mines were people who lost everything, and in return of healing, they are marked as slaves until they repay their bills. Until Sapphire gets rid of the slave mark, he can't live without paying his debt, or his heart will stop and die instantly. He must do so quickly so he can get his revenge, and this time he'll protect Altar. Sapphire arrives to a stand where they sell recovery water. It is really expensive, but they accept loans, so he just increases his debt but now has 10 recovery water bottles. He drinks them all up because a side effect of drinking a lot of it at once is that it will increase the person's mana. It wouldn't be a good choice if it wasn't for his second special perk, which allows him to have a 500% increased effectiveness of any potions he drinks. Sapphire repeats the process a few times until he comes up with a plan to get out of the mines to work somewhere else. First, he tells the head of the mining team that he heard some monster inside the caves, so that he calls for the hunting teams. In the next chapter, we see that Sapphire can't get any more loans until his sister comes up offering him a loan for selling his organs. He just has to repay back before the scheduled time. With this, he buys all the recovery water he can, and after drinking it, he feels he's met the requirements for something that we do not know yet. Just after this, the hunting team arrives and presents themselves. The leader is Goat, followed by Marcus and Dale. They are looking for Sapphire so they can go where the monster is. Sapphire presents himself and says he can use mana perception, an ability that allows him to spread mana outside his body in order to perceive everything around the user. Sapphire remembers one of the guys from the hunting team, so that means the other 2 didn't survive the mission. Anyway, he plans to use them to his advantage. They arrive at the entrance of the cave. There, a standard unit was waiting for them. They tied a rope to everyone's wrists. It is a magic bracelet. If anything happens to one of them, the standby unit will know and will call for reinforcements to the main base. After this, they head into the cave. Usually, the first group should only collect info about the dungeon, so that the main base can send the necessary force to clear it. But if the second group thinks they are capable, they can clear out the dungeon by themselves. Goat asks the other 2 if they want to, but they decide to hear his plans first. He basically uses some earth and cobbled excrement, the monsters that are in the cave, to attract them so they fall in a trap. The plan was a success, thanks to Sapphire who told Goat about the herbs. Goat knows that Sapphire planned to impress him in order to get into the hunting division, but for him, clearing that simple dungeon of cobbled monsters is just not enough. On their way out, Dale discovers the remains of what seems like cobbled bones, and in that moment a hand reaches to him and we see big red eyes glowing in the dark. Goat and Marcus get ready to fight while trying to escape, but the monster takes Marcus out with his tail. It is a predator, but Sapphire uses his third ability, Silver Key, which allows him to store any item in a room in another dimension, basically an inventory. Grabbing Goat's spears, he faces the monster. The fight is epic. The monster roars to paralyze its enemies with fear, but thanks to a nerve the protagonist had in his mouth, the effect was diminished. Sapphire took out a flask of green liquid. Thanks to a flashback, we see that it is a special poison that he learned to brew in his past life, thanks to some kind of alchemist genius called Faith. He pours the content of the flask in the tip of the spear and stabs the predator. After doing so, he just has to wait until it dies. But things aren't that easy. He was back against the wall when the creature opened his mouth, so he used that opportunity to throw the poison directly in its throat. One more minute until the monster dies, but he can't get away from him, so he decides to give it a finishing blow, right on his head using the spear, and a dagger and a powerful mana fists. After the fight is over, he heads over to Goat to have a talk with him. Before we get to see what they are going to talk about, we move on to the next chapter. We see in the woods that a group was massacred by a mysterious guy on a hood and a big muscle guy that's swimming around an iron ball in a chain. The last survivor of the group is begging them for mercy, saying that he is not one of worshippers of Tartarus. He calls the hooded guy Sahak, but instead of receiving mercy, he receives an iron ball to the head. After this, we see a marked centipede crawling out of the victim's mouth, but Sahak just kills it and claims that after all he was really a Tartarus worshipper. We change the scene and see Sahak kneeling down to whom he calls Master Matthias. It seems he is being questioned about the quantity of slaves he had to kill to find one single heretic. Sahak defends himself, saying that all those other slaves were probably already converted to their cult. Matthias doesn't seem too happy and asks Sahak to never embarrass him and to be more effective. We move back to see Zephyr and Goat in the Human Resources Department, transferring the protagonist from the mining team to Goat's unit of hunting. After Zephyr defeated the Predator, he convinced Goat not to say anything about the monster because he will keep the corpse. On the other hand, Goat and his team can tell the superiors that it was just a couple then and take all the credit, so he just uses his inventory to make the corpse disappear. Zephyr and Goat came to an agreement. He will keep the corpse of the monsters and they will get the merit of clearing 3 more dungeons. Our protagonist wants to be rid of the temple as soon as possible, but he has to stay because in a month the temple knight will raid a dungeon and find a special item that caused a sensation through the land. He must find this item no matter what. After Zephyr is successfully transferred to the hunting team, Goat shows him the way to the armory, but on their way there they meet Sahak, who was passing by with a few other cloaked individuals and a muscle man. Goat makes his Zephyr bow his head and tells him that he better treat Sahak as a superior, because he is an agent of the Inquisitor, a slave under direct orders of Matthias. Goat also explains that Sahak can kill anyone without a trial for being an heretic. Just as he was explaining this, Sahak turns around and starts talking to Zephyr. He presents himself and asks the protagonist for his name and position. Sahak can sense that he isn't an ordinary person. He can sense that Zephyr is really strong, which makes him curious about how he ended up in the mining team, and now moved on onto the hunting team. The rest of the clothed companions take position around Zephyr, and Sahak tells him to answer his question honestly. Pointing to the main character, Sahak asks him if he heard of the worshippers of the Demon Lord. Zephyr knows the kind of idiots who worship the Demon Lord, the ones who betrayed humanity and will bring the destruction of the world. Sahak points out to the protagonist that he is different from the others, saying he has a superior talent, that is why he serves Matthias. He exclaims that his guts tell him that Zephyr is dangerous while pointing a dagger to him. Sahak exclaims that he will be judged as a believer of the Demon Lord. That was the last drop for Zephyr. He broke the silence and asked if they could go somewhere else to talk, because Zephyr exclaims that he doesn't want to humiliate him in front of all these people. Hearing the protagonist say that, as if he could even stand a chance against 5 Inquisitors at the same time, Sahak was furious and goes into the offensive. He activates the ability called Red Field, which increases the power of the user and his allies depending on how many of them cast the skill. The protagonist is eager to fight, so he also takes an offensive position, one that Sahak has not seen yet. The Inquisitor thinks he is invincible as long as he is in the Red Field, so he goes forward and attacks the protagonist, but none of his blows hit because Zephyr deflects them all. This goes on for a while, but at one point the protagonist's hand reaches Sahak and one of Sahak's blows hits the protagonist's leg. To his surprise, Zephyr did not receive any damage and counterattacks, connecting a good hit on his face and throwing him on the floor. Someone attacks Zephyr's right flank, but he manages to block it. It was one of Sahak's companions that looked very strong. He keeps attacking, but our protagonist keeps dodging. This can get out of control quickly because they are still in the red field, so his opponent will keep getting stronger. No one can believe what they are seeing. The battle is incredible. Zephyr keeps darting around and dodging the fatal blows of his opponent until his hands were neutralized by the chains of his foe. He was ready to arrest Zephyr and make him pay when Sahak flashed through with much more speed than before and slashed his back. But he was underestimating our main character because when Sahak was close enough, Zephyr punched him with both his fists, then grabbed his head and kicked it. Sahak couldn't believe what was happening. Zephyr was still chained. His opponent was trying to pull him, so our protagonist activated his basic mana operation skills to boost himself and pull him over to take out both Sahak and his companion. No one could believe that Zephyr just defeated 2 leaders of the Inquisitor's division. Sahak was stunned and asks Zephyr who he is, but he replies that he doesn't deserve to know and leaves. As this happens, we see someone looking through a window at the protagonist, someone that was impressed by the things the main character could achieve, someone that thought maybe Zephyr was sent by his master. The people around Zephyr were shocked to see 2 leaders defeated and humiliated on the floor. He leaves the scene thinking that this completes the first stage of his plan and hoping that this event reaches his ears. Zephyr falls to the ground unable to move. This is called mana freeze, and it happens when you run out of mana. Suddenly, a purple light appears in the sky and the spirit of Shylock appears before Zephyr. This spirit belongs to the god of death, Ursura. It came to collect the death of using the skill Iron Wall, a skill that lets its user accumulate all damage and fatigue until the user's mana reaches 0. When that happens, the depth will be collected and all the damage and fatigue stored will be received at once. This skill has been the downfall of many adventurers who tried to use it to clear higher level dungeons. Usra is the god that feeds on the despair of humans on the brink of annihilation. The god is watching as the spirit he sent starts the countdown on Sapphire. He would be crushed by the weight of his death if he doesn't do anything quickly. 10 seconds left and Sapphire can't move his body. 3 seconds left and Sapphire reveals a small recovery potion he hid in his glove. 1 second left and just as he was going to be crushed, the weight stops in place. The spirit exclaims that Sapphire has still 1 point mana left, obviously thanks to the potion, and cancels the collection, saying the collection will be postponed, and the spirit disappears. Sapphire was prepared for this to happen. He was a survival expert who stood alive for a year even after all humanity was destroyed. Avoiding the collection was easy peasy, so he just mocks Usra, which makes the gods furious and squish the poor little turtle on his hand.